Saito and Akane have been at each other's throats for as long as they've known each other, and on this particular day, Akane is yelling at him for some reason, but Saito couldn't care less and tells her to leave him alone, and that just leads to an even bigger argument. One of Akane's friends, Hitomare, comes over and she finds it funny how they are always fighting, but now that she thinks about it, Akane seems to care way too much about what Saito does, so she's starting to wonder if there's something going on between the two of them. Akane is disgusted and denies having any feelings for Saito, because she'd much rather have a roach crawl into your ear and go out with him. And Saito is equally offended by the idea of dating someone like her, so they start arguing some more. Once the school day is over, Saito is on his way back home, but all of a sudden, he gets a phone call from his grandpa. He answers and his grandpa invites him to come have some tea with him at his house. But Saito has better things to do, so he's not interested in going on a tea date with his grandpa. Grandpa reminds him that he already made Saito the heir to his company, so the least he could do is spend some time with his dear old Pop-Pop while he's still alive. But even if Saito still doesn't want to, Grandpa knows a thing or two about kidnapping children, so he has a limo and some of his armed guards pull up beside Saito. Saito briefly considers running out of there like a track star, but then he realizes his grandpa is definitely crazy enough to have him shot and sent to the hospital, so he decides to comply. He gets in the limo, and while the guards are driving him, he asks where he is being taken. The guards are apologetic because they know their boss is being unreasonable, so he tells him that they were instructed to bring Saito to a villa, but they don't know what Saito's grandpa is planning. Saito's grandpa, Tenryu Hojo, once saved the Hojo group from the brink of collapse, and under his leadership, the Hojo group became a global high-tech corporation, so it isn't a stretch to say that he's one of the richest and most powerful people in the world. And it may be hard to believe, but Saito's grandpa cares about his grandson more than anything. But Saito's father, on the other hand, seems to care a lot more about milk. Eventually, they arrive at the house, so Saito sits outside and waits for his grandpa to show up. But while he's waiting, Akane unexpectedly shows up, and the first thing she does is yell at him. She asks Saito what he's doing here, so he explains that his grandpa asked him to come, and as it turns out, Akane's grandma invited her here for tea as well. The situation is strange, and neither of them knows what's going on, but they still can't stand each other, so they end up bickering as usual. Just then, Saito's grandpa and Akane's grandma show up, and they've got something important to tell the two kids, so everyone heads inside. A feast has been prepared because the two grandparents want to celebrate, but Saito has no idea what they are supposedly celebrating here. He also notices that Akane hasn't touched her food at all, so he asks if she's alright. But his concern is met with a roast because Akane says his ugly face made her lose her appetite. The two start arguing again, and both grandparents find it very amusing since it reminds them of how they used to act when they were back in high school. Saito is getting sick of this, so he asks them what they wanted to talk about, and the two respond saying that Saito and Akane are going to get married. Saito and Akane are in disbelief and think they must have misheard their grandparents because there's no way they just told the two of them to get married, especially since they are still in high school. But their grandparents are dead serious about it. Tenryu and Chiyo have known each other since they were kids and were even in love back then, but due to some petty arguments, they ended up drifting apart. Tenryu and Chiyo both ended up marrying other people, but after a lifetime apart, both of their partners are 6 feet under, so the two decided to reconnect, and ever since, Tenryu has been blowing Chiyo's granny back out every night. The point is, even though they are happy with their lives now, they can't help but wonder what could have been had they stayed together as a couple when they were kids. And what better way to relive their youth than to drive their grandkids into it and force the two of them to get married? It sounds like a joke, but they are both fully invested in this plan, and Chiyo expects Akane to give a detailed account of what Saito's back shots feel like later. Akane objects to the marriage because marriage is something that's supposed to be done out of love, not because two old people want to watch their grandkids getting frisky. Plus, Saito points out that it's literally illegal to force kids into marriage, and there's nothing Tenryu or Chiyo can do to make them agree to the marriage. Tenryu had expected that response, which is why he came prepared with some legal blackmail. He signals for the door to be opened and gives Saito an ultimatum. Either he marries Akane or the dog dies. Saito doesn't really care because that's not his dog, but then Tenryu threatens to write Saito out of his will and renounce him as his heir. That's something Saito does care about, so he's starting to think that marrying Akane might not be so bad, but Akane is still strictly opposed because if she's going to get married, and she only wants to do it with someone she loves. Just then, Chiyo calls Akane over, so Akane goes to her grandma's side, and she whispers something into Akane's ear. And whatever she said must have been a serious threat because it sends shivers down Akane's spine. Now that all the blackmail has been laid out, Tenryu says he is giving the two of them 3 days to decide whether they'll get married to each other or not. And then they zoom off so Tenryu can blow Chiyo's back out again. Once their grandparents are gone, Akane asks Sato what they are going to do, but neither of them has made a decision. Getting disowned would be really bad for Saito, but he needs to have all the details first, so he asks Akane what threat her grandma made so he knows how bad her situation is. Akane gets defensive and refuses to tell him since it's a private matter. Later that night, Akane is laying in bed and thinking about how she has never managed to outperform Saito, and what pisses her off even more is the fact that he always beats her without even trying. She decides to call Himari to ask for advice on what she should do, and after explaining the situation of being forced to marry someone she doesn't like, hypothetically of course, Himari is surprised that stuff like that still happens. Akane asks what Himari would do if she were in the same situation, so Himari tells her that she would have to refuse since she has someone she already likes, and she would never marry someone else. Akane is surprised to hear that Himari has a crush since she has never mentioned him before, but that's just because Akane never asked. Akane asks for the details, but Himari doesn't want to tell her the guy's name for now since she still hasn't confessed to him yet, although she doesn't admit that it's someone from their class. They've talked about Himari's love life enough for one night, so Himari changes the subject and asks Akane if she's in love with anyone. Akane has never had time to fall in love with someone before, and right now the only emotion Akane is feeling is a burning hatred for a certain someone. Since Akane doesn't have a crush or anything, Himari thinks it would be fine if she just got married like her grandparents want. After all, assuming this hypothetical guy isn't a serial killer, they could just live together and split rent and bills, so it would be a great way for Akane to save on living expenses. Although she probably need to give birth to an heir at some point, so she might end up getting non-stop back shots to make that happen, and Akane doesn't think she could handle that. Meanwhile, back at his house, Saito is having a panic attack because he already has a hard enough time dealing with Akane at school, but if they end up married, then he will never be able to escape her constant nagging. Saito's cousin, Shies, can tell that something is bothering him, so she asks him what's wrong, and Saito explains that their grandpa is threatening to disown him if he doesn't agree to his demands. That definitely sounds like something their grandpa would do, so she asks Saito what he plans to do. She's perfectly fine with him giving up his rights to the company if that's what he wants, because even if he ends up becoming a hobo, she will still love him the same. However, she knows that Saito has big dreams, and if he is going to accomplish those dreams, then he will need access to the Hojo Group's resources. Regardless of what he chooses to do, she promises that she will be by his side to help him every step of the way, and Saito is really glad to have her with him. 3 days go by and both Saito and Akane meet with their grandparents because they have made their decisions and are going to get married. Since that has been settled, Saito says he and Akane will file the paperwork for their marriage once they graduated, but that's not good enough for their grandparents because they expect Saito and Akane to be in their life as a married couple immediately. They've even got a brand new house lined up for them, so they drop them off there and drive off. Akane starts freaking out because she can't just suddenly start living with Saito, but Saito is already desensitized to the BS his grandpa pulls, so this doesn't surprise him. The two of them head inside, and if nothing else, this house is actually pretty nice, so Akane thinks living here might actually be fun. Or it would be if she didn't have to stay here with Saito. This place is fully equipped with everything they could possibly need, but there's just one problem: there's only one bed. They call their grandparents to complain about the bed, but they intentionally set it up that way because they want Saito and Akane to sleep together. In fact, they are making it an official rule that Akane and Saito must sleep in the same bed every single night, and Chiyo wishes Akane luck with the inevitable pounding she'll receive. Saito realizes that their grandparents must have set up cameras in order to watch them at night, which is most definitely illegal, but he can't figure out where they put them. However, while Saito is worrying about the cameras, Akane is worrying about having to sleep in the same bed as him. She nervously asks if he really intends to do it tonight, but Saito has no idea what she's talking about, so Akane gets embarrassed and starts yelling because she thinks he's going to double stuff her all night until she can't walk anymore. Saito has no idea how she came to that conclusion, but he tells her he has no intention of doing that. However, Akane still doesn't trust him, so she threatens to stab him with her comically large pencil if he tries anything and runs out of the bedroom. For now, they still need to get their stuff unpacked, so Akane is carrying her stuff upstairs, but that box looks pretty heavy, so Saito asks if she needs any help. Akane rejects his offer because she thinks Saito just wants to get a hold of her stuff so he can do pervy stuff with it. Besides, she's perfectly capable of doing it by herself. If she doesn't want his help, Saito isn't going to force the issue, but after taking a few steps, Akane loses her footing and falls backwards. Thankfully, she wasn't falling with an umbrella, so Saito catches her and she's perfectly safe, but he asks that she be a little more careful because if she ends up getting herself killed, he'd become the prime murder suspect. After everything has been unpacked, Saito finds a meal his grandpa left for him to eat, and Tenryu may be a jerk sometimes, but this is actually pretty helpful. After warming up the pizza, Saito is about to start eating, but Akane smells the food and she's really hungry, but she's too stubborn to ask for a piece. Saito doesn't want her to starve, so he ends up giving her a slice, but she takes it and immediately leaves without even saying thank you. A few minutes later, Saito is ready for bed, so he heads into the bedroom and lays down to go to sleep, but then Akane comes in and he remembers that they have to share the bed. They both agree that they weren't going to do anything, but there's no way Saito can fall asleep like this. To distract himself, he starts a conversation and asks Akane why she agreed to this marriage, but she still doesn't want to give any details about her reasons. This marriage is just a formality, so she's just going to have to put up with it for the sake of her dream, even if it means following their grandparents' weird rules. Saito suddenly realizes that if their grandparents can arbitrarily make up rules whatever they want, then it's only a matter of time before they make a rule about the two of them having kids. Akane realizes he's right, so she freaks out a little, and in the process, Saito accidentally touches her butt, so yet another fight ensues. That brings us back to the present, where Akane reminds Saito that under no circumstances is he allowed to tell anyone that they are married. Saito tells her that he already intends to keep it a secret, but Akane still doesn't trust him because what guy wouldn't want to brag about getting married to her? The next day they walk into the classroom together. Akane is stopped by Himari, whom noticed her talking to Saito outside earlier. Curious, Himari asks what that was about. Akane, flustered and unwilling to reveal their secret, quickly says it was nothing. Himari finds this strange since Akane seemed angry at Saito before. Hoping to end the conversation, Akane lies and says she just told him to stop speaking to her so casually. Meanwhile, Saito sits at his desk only to find Shuzi standing in front of him with a blank expression. She steps closer and sniffs him. Noticing his shampoo smells different, she asks where he slept last night. Saito, wanting to hide his secret marriage to Akane, awkwardly looks away and claims his dad bought a weird shampoo, so he's trying it out. She keeps her dull gaze and remarks it's not just the shampoo, he smells like a girl. Without another word, she leans in and gently bites his neck. Then, as if concluding a mystery, she states he must be married. Saito's eyes widen in shock. Before he can respond, Shize reveals she noticed strange behavior from their grandpa and his company, so she investigated. She even discovered their new house. As she's about to say he married Akane, Saito covers her mouth and rushes her out of the classroom. Takes her up a single flight of stairs and is seen panting heavily. Our boy needs to start hitting the gym. Shize smirks and tells him she has no reason to keep his secret since he never informed her about the marriage. However, she offers to stay quiet on one condition. After some thought, she decides her price. His life will be in her hands from now on. A couple of hours later, Saito slumps at his desk, exhausted after an intense PE class. Just as he starts to relax, Akane and Himari approach him. Akane scolds him for leaving the PE equipment out instead of putting it back in the storeroom. Saito defends himself, explaining that the next class would be using the equipment, so he thought it would help to leave it out. Their bickering escalates, drawing amused looks from their classmates, who have grown used to their banter and find it entertaining. Later that afternoon at home, Saito is reading when he hears Akane scream from the kitchen. Rushing in, he finds her standing in front of the open fridge. She demands to know why it's filled with so many juice cans. Saito calmly explains that he bought concentrated vegetable juice because it's rich in vitamins and will make them healthier. Akane glares at him and then snaps that it won't make them healthier since it lacks proper nutrition. Saito comes prepared, opening the second fridge to reveal shelves stacked with cup noodles. Akane stares in horror before screaming at the top of her lungs. Saito, oblivious to her distress, beams with pride, thinking she's impressed. He confidently explains that her reaction is justified because cup noodles are the ultimate food, cheap, quick, and convenient. Akane glares at the ground, dreading the conversation, and asks where he plans to get his protein. But Saito, ever prepared, grabs a bottle and his trusty tub of protein powder, proudly declaring that humanity invented protein shakes for this exact reason. He mixes one with dramatic flair, adding that the ideal shake balances whey and casein in perfect harmony. Sliding the bottle across the table, he offers her a taste. She looks at him with increasing alarm, asking if he plans to survive solely on cup noodles and vegetable juice. Saito nods, insisting that this is the pinnacle of cooking. Akane, exasperated, retorts that it's not cooking at all, just a sad science experiment. He repeatedly tries to coax her into drinking the shake, but she stubbornly refuses, calling it disgusting. Her expression shifts to one of deep concern as she realizes his diet could kill him. And if he dies, their marriage ends with him. Determined to intervene, Akane declares she'll show him what real cooking looks like. Saito dismisses her, saying he's fine with his protein shake, but she cuts him off and orders him to watch. She quickly dons a cooking apron and gets to work. As she moves around the kitchen, she glances at Saito, seated at the dining table with a blank, almost puppy-like expression. She thinks to herself that he'll be blown away by how good her food tastes. When she finally places the food in front of him and sits across the table, she waits eagerly for his reaction. Saito picks up his chopsticks and cautiously checks the dish for hidden traps such as nails or explosives. Finding none, he takes a bite. His eyes widen slightly as memories of childhood meals flood back and a faint smile appears on his face. Akane, still watching, asks him what he thinks. To her surprise, he says it's just a simple, home-cooked meal, but to him it means everything. Offended, she snatches the plate away, declaring that if it's not good enough, she'll feed it to the dogs. Saito tries to grab it back, protesting that he never said it was bad. Akane, still fuming, snaps that he didn't say it was good either, leaving her seething as they argue over the plate. Saito grabs the plate and starts eating while Akane tries to stop him. Once he's done, he sets the plate on the table, claps his hands in a quick prayer, and leans back, satisfied with his full stomach. The next morning, Akane tries to wake Saito up for school, but he's fast asleep, dreaming about cuddling in bed with his cousin Shizzy. Still caught in his dream, he pulls Akane into bed, mistaking her for Shizzy. After a few moments, she snaps out of it and yells at him to get up. They both get out of bed and Saito apologizes, saying he didn't realize she'd come to wake him for school. Akane, however, tells him she didn't wake him up for school, but to scold him for leaving the dishes unwashed. Since she cooked dinner the night before, she insists it's only fair for him to do the cleaning. Saito responds casually, saying she should just use the clean utensils for now, and he'll do the dishes later when they pile up. This infuriates Akane, and she yells at him to do the dishes immediately. Saito brushes it off, explaining that he's used to cleaning once a month and doesn't see the big deal. Akane is horrified to hear this, her heart skipping a beat at the thought of someone cleaning only once a month. Saito, noticing her reaction, tells her not to be so against the idea of living with trash, claiming humans can coexist peacefully with it. Akane screams back, saying she doesn't want to live with trash. She wants a proper, clean, and beautiful life. It's clear they're complete opposites. Saito doesn't care much for cleanliness and even questions why people take baths so often, while Akane is nearly in tears, unable to believe she's sharing a roof with someone like him. Later that morning, as they walk to school, Saito trails behind Akane, wondering how they'll survive this marriage with such opposing values. That night, Saito is happily playing the new zombie video game that just dropped. He's completely absorbed, blasting zombie heads on screen when Akane walks in, complaining about the noise. She glances at the screen and immediately covers her eyes, disgusted by the gore, and tells him to stop playing. Saito refuses, so they start tugging at the console in a heated argument. In the middle of the chaos, the doorbell rings and Akane lets go of the console. Saito stumbles backward, accidentally turning the game off in the process. Our boy then freezes in shock as he realizes his 12 hours of gameplay has been erased since his dumbass forgot to click on save. Hours later, Saito wraps a towel around his waist and heads to the bathroom for a bath since he can no longer stand his horrible stench. As he steps inside, he freezes again. Akane is already there, her eyes closed, fully naked and unaware of his presence. She doesn't even notice when he enters, so Saito walks out with an embarrassed expression. As he's about to leave the bathroom, he starts thinking it's strange that she didn't notice him at all. He wonders if she might have passed out or something. He steps back into the bathroom and sees her in the same position, eyes closed. She's breathing, so he assumes she's just asleep. Then it hits him. This is how people end up drowning. He calls out to her, trying to wake her up. To his surprise, she just murmurs gibberish. Deciding not to push it, he turns to leave, but her head tilts dangerously close to the water. Saito rushes in and tries to lift her out of the bath, but he isn't strong enough and she ends up falling onto him. She rests against his chest for a moment before waking up and realizing the situation. With tears forming in her eyes, she asks why she's naked with him and accuses him of assault. Saito stammers, trying to explain, but she doesn't listen and calls him a pervert, ordering him to get out. A short while later, Akane is dressed and blow-drying her hair, still stunned that Saito, her biggest rival, saw her naked. She begins to consider that she might have fallen asleep in the bath and wonders if he was actually trying to help her. Later that night, Saito is reading in bed when Akane walks into the room, a hint of guilt visible on her face. Feeling bad about how she reacted earlier, she tries to start a conversation and apologize. But Saito, clearly not in the mood, simply says he's going to sleep. That reaction from him hurts her feelings and she starts quietly crying in bed. The next day at school, Himari notices Akane seems down and asks what's wrong. Hearing the question, Akane rushes to hug Himari. They sit down and Akane explains her problem with Saito, but she keeps his identity anonymous because she doesn't want Himari to know about their marriage. Himari thinks it over and suggests giving the person a big hug. Akane immediately rejects that idea. Instead, Himari advises her to talk things out with a person, reminding her that respect is a two-way street. It's about respecting them too. Meanwhile, Saito is having lunch outside with Shizi and venting about his issues with Akane. Shizi bluntly suggests they get a divorce, but Saito disagrees, saying he can't give up because he needs to honor the promise he made to his grandfather. Since divorce isn't an option, Shizi advises him to focus on getting along with Akane. She stands up from the bench and tells him it's not that hard. All he has to do is listen to her, be sensitive, and learn to compromise. Later that day, Saito comes home determined to try Shizi's advice. But as he opens the door, he sees Akane standing there with an intensely angry expression. Startled, he tries to walk past her, thinking he'll follow the advice later. Before he can leave, Akane grabs his arm, her expression softening as she gently asks if they can talk. Saito assumes she's about to bring up divorce, but to his surprise, she wants to discuss how they can make their marriage work. A few moments later, they sit across from each other with cups of tea, agreeing they'll need to set some ground rules if they're going to live together. Saito begins by saying he prefers washing his clothes and dishes only when they pile up, but Akane raises her voice slightly, saying she refuses to live such a dirty lifestyle. Hearing that, Saito agrees to do his laundry more often, which surprises Akane since she didn't expect him to be that cooperative. With that settled, Saito asks Akane to allow him to touch her body, but not in the way you think. He just wants her to tolerate the occasional bumping of their bodies at night, clarifying that it's just because the bed is cramped. Akane hesitantly agrees, her face flushed, but she warns him that she won't forgive him if he tries touching under her clothes. Now that they've addressed the basics, Saito suggests they make it a habit to thank each other for even the smallest things, believing it will help them grow closer. Akane agrees but insists he compliment her cooking more. She reminds him of how he previously called her food normal, which she didn't consider praise. Saito, on the other hand, thinks calling it normal should be enough, but he doesn't argue further. Later that night, Akane is on the phone with Himari, telling her they made some small progress in their relationship. She notices Saito approaching and quickly ends the call. When Saito enters the room, he sees her lying on the bed with a deep blush, awkwardly giving him permission to touch her body. But our boy decides to fumble the bag as usual and tells her that he's not going to do that. Over time, things start improving between them. One day, Saito surprises Akane with a thoughtful gift, showing he's willing to put in effort for their relationship. That evening, Akane prepares an extravagant dinner with several delicious dishes. This time, Saito compliments the food, saying it's really good. Akane blushes, locking eyes with him, and shyly says she's glad to hear that. After the meal, Saito takes it upon himself to wash the dishes, but can't stop thinking about how Akane looked at him after his compliment. Just then, Akane joins him in the kitchen and offers to help with the dishes. Saito is shocked since he never thought of her as the type to care about helping out. As she washes alongside him, he starts to see her in a new light. He realizes that while he's only seen her in bad moods before, she's actually really beautiful when she's not angry. One night, Saito is busy reading his favorite book when Akane interrupts him. She tells him she rented a movie that caught her attention. Saito assumes she wants him to move, so he starts to get up, but Akane stops him. Confused, he stares at her, unsure of what she wants. With a shy and embarrassed expression, she holds up the movie tape, 24 uncut hours of kitten footage. She says she wants them to watch it together. Saito is baffled and considers this to be utter bullshit, wondering why anyone would want to watch kittens for 24 hours straight. Fortunately, Akane finds the 3-hour version of the movie instead, and Saito quickly suggests they watch that version instead. They begin watching the movie, and while Akane enjoys every second of it, Saito dozes off on the couch, bored out of his mind. When the movie ends, Akane expresses how much she loved it and suggests they watch the full 24-hour version next time. Saito suddenly wakes up from his nap, disoriented and muttering something about an alien planet. Since they watched something Akane likes, she insists it's only fair for Saito to pick the next thing to watch. However, Saito admits he prefers games to movies. Unfortunately, Akane doesn't know how to play games. Determined, Saito holds his controller up and vows to teach her, hoping she might even enjoy gaming as much as he does. Akane doubts she'll ever like it, let alone get addicted. 30 minutes later, Akane is having the time of her life, celebrating her victory after defeating a game boss. She cheers loudly and Saito watches her with a faint smile, surprised at how much fun he's having with his so-called arch-nemesis. Later that night, as they lie in bed, Saito wakes up and notices Akane isn't covered by the blanket. He adjusts it, pulling the blanket over her. To his surprise, Akane is already awake. She thanks him for the fun they had that day. Facing opposite directions in bed, Saito tells her she can pick the next game they buy and he'll pick the next movie they watch. Akane then tells him to stop addressing her without actually using her name, adding that she prefers when he calls her Akane. The next day at school, Akane helps Saito pick up an eraser he dropped. As Saito lifts his head from his desk, he thanks her and Akane blushes lightly in response. Himari walks up to Akane moments later and asks if she and Saito had a fight. Not wanting anyone to know she's getting along with Saito, Akane insists they're always fighting. However, Himari senses something is off. Their behavior doesn't match their usual constant bickering. Feeling cornered, Akane rushes out of the classroom and goes home, skipping the first period entirely. A few hours later, Saito is in the library searching for a book when Shize sneaks up behind him. She covers his eyes with her hands and playfully asks him to guess who it is. Knowing Shize is the only person who would pull such a stunt, Saito correctly guesses it's her. She laughs and removes her hands from his eyes, confirming his guess. Shize notices Saito holding a book on communication skills, and although she knows that his communication skills are dog water, she still asks him what it's for. Saito explains that he thinks it might help him strengthen his relationship with Akane. He mentions that he's learned so far that teamwork between both parties can build solidarity. During the break, Saito calls out to Akane as she walks down the hall. Akane turns around with an annoyed look, saying she prefers not to talk much at school. Saito asks if she's busy or has plans for later in the day. When he learns she's free, he invites her to go shopping with him after school. Akane realizes this might be a date, but before she can overreact, Saito quickly pulls her into an empty room to avoid being overheard. Akane scolds him for dragging her into such a dark space because she thinks he's trying to get some. But Saito isn't trying to catch a case, so he clarifies that he only did it because she was about to say something about a date. Akane blushes slightly and points out that it's basically a date since guys and girls don't just meet up for no reason. Saito tries to brush it off, saying it's not a date and that he only needs her help to carry groceries. Akane finds this amusing and decides to play along, leading them both to laugh like total goofballs. After school, Akane is startled when Himari greets her excitedly. Himari's shift at work got cancelled, and she wants to hang out. However, Akane already has plans with Saito and doesn't know how to tell her. Himari enthusiastically talks about all the fun they could have together, but Akane, with tears in her eyes, admits she already has plans with someone. Himari takes no offense and, curious, asks if it's a new friend. When Akane says it's someone Himari knows, Himari quickly guesses it's Saito and teasingly asks if it's a date. Flustered, Akane speeds off to avoid answering any more questions. As Akane runs, she suddenly trips over Shize, who's lying on the ground. Startled, Akane helps her up and apologizes repeatedly, asking why Shize was on the floor. Shize casually says she was waiting for her. But Shize doesn't let people step on her without consequences, so she hands Akane a legendary sword as compensation. Akane, uninterested, slowly walks away, saying she doesn't care about such things. Before Akane leaves, Shize asks if she plans to build teamwork with Saito and blocks her path until she answers. Akane, not wanting to deal with this, apologizes and runs off in the opposite direction. Later, Akane and Saito walk through the park, both blushing as they approach the supermarket near their homes. Inside, Saito notices they're out of eggs at home and picks up a pack to place in the cart. Akane stops him, pointing out that he should check the price before just adding things to the cart. A few minutes later, Akane discovers the supermarket is holding a limited-time sale, and a crowd has already gathered to grab the discounted items. She tries to push her way through the chaos, but quickly gets shoved to the side. Saito attempts to jump in as well, but he's tossed aside even faster than Akane. Left lying on the floor in shame, they both burst into laughter at how terrible they were at fighting for the sale. Akane stands up, smiling, and declares that she isn't going to give up. Saito gets up too, but he admits he's ready to quit. Akane looks him in the eye and tries to raise him up by insisting he has to come with her. Our boy has successfully been rizzed up, so he blushes and agrees, and then after that, the two walk home together. That night, Akane wakes up to find Saito with his finger in front of her face, about to poke her cheek. She sits up and immediately scolds him, accusing him of planning something as gruesome as gouging a hole in her cheek. Saito denies her accusation and decides to admit he's a total simp by explaining that he couldn't resist poking her cheek because she looked so cute while sleeping. Akane blushes at his response and hugs her pillow. She lies back down and tells him he can watch her sleep, but only for a little while, which is still very creepy. The next morning, they both wake up and greet each other with awkward blushes. Later that afternoon, on their way to school, they pass by a stall selling strawberry cream buns. Akane wants one, so Saito goes to buy it for her. He returns with the pastry in hand, but it's too large for her to eat alone. He suggests they split it, and as they share the cream bun, Himari spots them. She's surprised because she's never seen them together outside school and begins to suspect something is going on between them. Akane quickly denies it, claiming Saito was just stalking her. That night, Akane stays up late studying for an upcoming test. Saito, on the other hand, doesn't see the point in studying. He boasts that he never studies and just memorizes everything from class, even scoring perfectly on the last test. Akane takes this as mockery, throws her pillow at him and tells him to leave. A few minutes later, Saito knocks on her door and hands her a snack, thinking it might help her focus. She opens the door and is delighted to see a strawberry cake. She takes it inside, wondering why he would go out of his way to make it for her. She decides to take one bite and is overwhelmed by how delicious it is. Filled with joy, she eats the cake, knowing the sugar will help her power through the night. Saito prepares more dishes for her, which she eats with a happy smile. The next morning at school, Akane is walking through the halls when she suddenly collapses. Luckily, Himari is nearby and rushes to her side. Himari asks if she's okay, and Akane reassures her that she's fine, just a bit sleep-deprived from studying all night. Himari urges her not to push herself too hard and reminds her that her health is more important. But Akane is more focused on getting the top grade in the class. Himari advises her again, pointing out that she'll never outscore Saito. Despite this, Akane remains determined to surpass Saito in every way. That evening, Saito brings her a late-night snack, only to find her slumped over her desk. Assuming she's fallen asleep, he moves closer but notices her uncomfortable expression. He quickly realizes she isn't feeling well. Saito checks Akane's temperature and sees that it's a worrying 40 degrees. She's clearly burning up from a fever. Akane complains about feeling sweaty and uncomfortable, so Saito grabs a wet rag and carefully cleans the areas where she's sweating the most. As he tends to her, Akane mumbles weakly, talking about how much she needs to study if she ever wants to achieve her dream of becoming a doctor. She explains that her ultimate goal is to help people live long, healthy lives and to be someone who can step in whenever someone is in need. Akane's voice turns quieter as she shares how her parents can't afford to send her to medical school. She reveals that the only reason she agreed to marry Saito in the first place was because her grandmother promised to fund her education if she married him. Hearing this, Saito feels a mix of surprise and admiration. He never knew about this deeply personal dream of hers. Akane's frustration starts to spill out. She vents about how hard she studies every day but can never seem to surpass him, even though he barely puts in any effort and still gets perfect scores. Then, almost as if she's confessing something she had buried for a long time, she admits that she's always admired him, even if she never said it out loud before. Realizing what she just admitted, Akane's face turns red, and she yells at him to forget everything she just said. A few minutes later, Saito checks her temperature again. This time it has climbed to 42 degrees. Alarmed, he decides it's time to call an ambulance, but Akane insists there's no need for that and tells him to just go to bed. He tries calling an ambulance anyway, but can't get through. Seeing no other option, he picks her up in his arms and tells her he won't just stand by while she's suffering. As he carries her outside, Akane looks at him with surprise. She never thought he had the strength to lift her so easily. She jokes about him being stronger than she thought he was. Bro will hold onto that compliment for the rest of his life. That aside, Saito decides to use this precious moment to bring up the dream she mentioned earlier. At first, she assumes he's about to roast her about it, but instead he tells her that he believes in her. He's confident she'll achieve her dream because she's someone who never gives up no matter how hard things get. While running toward the hospital, Saito reflects on their unusual marriage. Though he initially disliked her, he finds himself thinking that maybe this marriage could end up being something wonderful after all. The scene shifts to the following morning. Akane wakes Saito up by leaning over him with a playful smirk and a mock death threat. She quickly laughs it off, saying he should be grateful she woke him up in time for school. Saito groans, realizing she's back to her usual antics. It turns out Akane only had a bad cold that day, and a week later, everything has returned to normal. At school, Saito's day starts with Himari approaching him to congratulate him on his perfect test score. She even flirts with him a little, but her attempts go completely over his head. Not long after, Akane walks up to him with a deadly serious look in her eyes. For a second, he braces himself for a scolding, but her expression softens into a blush. She reminds him that he has a wife and warns him not to get too close to other girls. As she turns and walks away, Saito can't help but smile to himself. Watching her, he thinks that maybe he really does have the cutest wife in the world. Before they head into class, Akane gives Saito the lunchbox she made for him. She is upset that he forgot to bring it with him and thinks he doesn't like her cooking, but on the contrary, Saito says he loves Akane's cooking, so it really was just an accident that he forgot it. They head into class, and when lunchtime arrives, the two of them prepare to begin eating. But before Saito could take even a single bite, Shizi comes over and says she's hungry, so is his little sister. She demands to be given his entire lunch. Saito reminds her that she already had 3 bowls of rice. But Shizi doesn't care about the food she ate before. All that matters is that Saito has food, and she wants that food. Everyone in class decides to butt in on the argument, and since Shizi is cute, They all take her side and tell Saito to let her have some of his food. Saito eventually caves and lets Shizi sit in his lap so she can have a little bite of his food. But all of a sudden, Himari walks over, and the first thing she notices is that Saito and Akane's lunches look the same. They may be arranged differently, but they got the exact same ingredients, so it's almost like Akane made Saito's lunch for him. She jokes that the two of them must be going out with each other after all, but they both deny it immediately. In fact, they were a little too quick to deny it, so all their classmates start getting suspicious that something might actually be going on between the two of them. Saito tries to think up a good excuse for why he has the same lunch as Akane, but when he turns back to his bento box, he finds it completely clean. It shouldn't be humanly possible to eat food that quickly or efficiently, but when it comes to her brother's food, Shizi will always find a way. Since the incriminating bento is gone, all of Saito's classmates lose interest in the conversation and walk away. Shizi tries to act like this was her plan all along, but that's a lie because she really just wanted to eat Saito's food. A little while later, Saito is walking through the halls when he happens to run into Himari. She jumps down the staircase and says she has something to ask regarding his lunch earlier. She wants to know if Akane actually did make the bento for him or not, but Saito obviously can't tell her the truth, so he lies and tells her that he and Akane just happened to use the same ingredients. Himari then asks if Akane and Saito are dating, so Saito says they aren't, and Himari seems satisfied by that answer, so apologizes for asking such a weird question and walks off. Later that night, Saito and Akane are in bed, but Akane seems to be a little on edge because she can hear something moving. She turns around to see what it is, and to her horror, there's a terrifying figure standing over the bed. She screams so loud that Saito thinks they are under attack, but when he asks Akane what's wrong, she just tells him she thinks she saw a ghost over there. Saito takes a look, but he doesn't see anything, so he decides to go back to sleep, but Akane is too scared to sleep, so she begs Saito to stay awake with her until she calms down. Since Akane doesn't want to sleep, Saito suggests that the two of them do some reading to take their mind off it. However, a few moments later, Akane comes running into Saito's study room because she heard more ghost sounds coming from the living room. Saito asks if she managed to record anything as proof, but she didn't, so he thinks Akane is overreacting. He heads out of the room, and Akane asks him where he's going, so he tells her he's just going to the bathroom. However, Akane still doesn't want to be left alone, so she begs Saito to let her in the bathroom with him while he takes a dump. Saito did not agree to her request, but that wasn't the end of it because a few minutes later, Akane comes into Saito's room and tells him she's about to take a bath, so she wants him to come in with her. Saito can't believe what he's hearing, but Akane is dead serious about it, so he ends up sitting outside to shower while Akane takes a bath. The next day, Saito meets with Shizi on the roof of the school, and he's complaining a lot about how weird Akane has been acting recently. Akane keeps talking about some ghosts running around their house, but he doesn't think it's true since he has never seen anything himself. Shizi, on the other hand, says there really might be a ghost, but to confirm, she needs to talk with Akane. With that said, Shizi loves causing mischief, so as soon as she sees Akane, she decides to play a harmless little prank and nearly yells that Akane is married to Saito. However, before she could finish that sentence, she gets silenced and abducted by Saito and Akane. They bring her to an empty classroom, and now that there's no threat of their secret being exposed, Akane begins seething with rage because she told Saito not to tell anyone about their marriage. In Saito's defense, he never actually told Shizi about his marriage, she just kind of figured it out on her own, so there was nothing he could do about it. Shizi confirms this, and now that Akane thinks about it, it is natural for Shizi to have found out since she is Saito's little sister. Moving on, Shizi mentions that she heard Akane was scared of ghosts in her house, so Shizi is here to tell her that her house is most definitely haunted, and the ghost will make Akane's test scores drop if they don't do anything about it soon. Saito can tell that Shizi is just trying to mess with Akane, but Akane totally believes every word Shizi is saying, so she asks Shizi to please come to their house and get rid of the ghost. Once they arrive, Shizi begins making a big deal of just how haunted this house really is, but not to worry, she knows exactly how to get rid of ghosts. But to do that, she has to go through all their personal belongings. They arrive at Saito's study room, but since he barely ever studies, it's more like a library. Shizi assumes that means Saito has naughty magazines in there, but he never said that, and he definitely doesn't have any in his room. Shizi is still convinced that there are magazines to be found, so she decides to search his room. Saito lets her do it since he knows there's nothing embarrassing for her to find, but to his horror, he was wrong. Shizi manages to find a pair of his underwear, and let's not talk about what she's doing with his underwear. Next, Shizi wants to check Akane's room, but after seeing what Shizi did with Saito's underwear, Akane doesn't want to risk letting Shizi anywhere near her clothes. They move on to the bedroom, and Akane explains that she clearly saw the ghost standing over the bed right here. Shizi puts a lot of thought into what the ghost could have possibly been, and then she comes to the conclusion that she was the ghost all along. In truth, Shizi got keys to the house from their grandpa, so she visited Saito and Akane in the middle of the night without telling them. The reason she was sneaking around so much and standing over their bed all night was because she was hoping to watch Saito and Akane get hit and steamy in bed, but that never happened. Anyway, Shizi is hungry now, so she says she wants to stay over for dinner. However, even though Akane is relieved to find out that there's no ghosts, there's no way she's going to reward Shizi by giving her a home-cooked dinner. But then Shizi starts complimenting Akane's cooking skills, and after a lot of flattery, Akane ends up making a lavish meal for Shizi. Shizi is really enjoying the meal, and Akane is glad that Shizi likes her food. But when Shizi gets a piece of food stuck on her cheek, Saito picks it off her face without a second thought, so Akane can't help but notice that the two of them seem usually close with one another. After dinner, Saito and Shizi head to the living room to play some games together, and yet again, Akane can't help but get the feeling that some incest is going on here. I mean, look at them. Saito can tell that Akane is slightly mad about something, and while she is a little bit jealous of how close Saito is with Shizi, she won't admit that, so she yells that she's not mad at all. Saito is really confused and doesn't know what Akane could possibly be upset about, but he doesn't want to stick around to find out, so he says he's going to take a bath. Shizi gets up as well and says she'll follow him. But this is where Akane draws the line, since Shizi is pretty much the same age as Saito, so there's no way this is okay. Shizi says she and Saito always bathe together, so it's not a big deal, although as far as Saito remembers, the last time he had a bath with Shizi was before he moved in with Akane. Akane has heard enough at this point and declares that the two of them are not allowed to bathe together in this house, no matter how natural they think it is. A couple hours later, Saito is lying in bed when Akane comes into the bedroom. She asks where Shizi is, so Saito tells her that Shizi is still playing games in the living room. Akane is relieved, since that means she can finally talk with Saito in private. Saito has no idea what she wants to talk about, but he's willing to listen, so he puts his book down. The first thing Akane wants to talk about is that cat game he was playing with Shizi. Saito usually never buys cat games, so if she had known that he bought a cat-themed game for her sake, then she would have asked to play with him. Saito says he didn't bring it up because he knew how much Akane wanted to study, but even so, Akane would have gladly taken a break to play with him. Also, she wishes she could have played it before Shizi did, but Saito has no idea why that would be important to her. He asks if there's a special reason behind it, but Akane just gets embarrassed and yells that for someone so smart, Saito can be really dumb at times. Yelling at Saito somehow made Akane feel a lot better, but there's still one more complaint she has. She tells Saito that she thinks he pampers Shizi a little too much, but again, Saito thinks it's perfectly normal. Besides, Shizi is blood-related. All of a sudden, Akane feels a hand grab her ass, and Saito feels a hand drifting dangerously close to his meat, so both of them are getting really mixed signals right now. They both deny doing anything, and a few seconds later, Shizi pops out from underneath the covers, and it turns out she was just messing with him again. She says she is going to spend the night in their bed so she can be next to Saito while she sleeps like always. Again, Akane can't believe that Saito always sleeps with Shizi, but Shizi really enjoys lying next to her brother. Akane gets to have it all to herself most of the time anyway, so one day with Shizi shouldn't be a problem. Akane tries to explain that she only sleeps with Saito because their grandparents forced her, but Shizi assumes Akane just wants to be alone with Saito, so she offers to sleep on the floor instead. However, Akane doesn't want Shizi to misunderstand anything, so she says they should all sleep together after all. Later that night, Shizi turns to Akane and tells her that she needs to be more direct about her feelings for Saito. Akane tries to act like she doesn't know what Shizi is talking about, but Shizi could clearly see that Akane was jealous of how much Saito was pampering her. Although Saito is really dense when it comes to things like this, so he will never figure it out unless Akane tells him herself. Shizi continues, saying she's glad Saito has someone like Akane around, since she was worried he might end up alone for the rest of his life. But when Akane asks Shizi to explain what she means, Shizi just goes to sleep. Himari meets up with Akane at a cafe, and the first thing she does once they get seated is ask Akane if she likes Saito. Akane is caught off guard, so she frantically denies any affection for Saito, but she's curious why Himari would ask such a question in the first place. Himari admits that she's got a crush on Saito, but Akane doesn't understand what she could possibly see in a guy like him. Himari says she loves everything about Saito, like how handsome and prepared he always is. There was this one time that a girl on their sports team fainted from a heat stroke. But while everyone else was panicking, Saito remained calm and took charge of the situation. Now that Akane thinks about it, she realizes Saito is pretty reliable in a crisis, but that's beside the point. Himari says she really admires someone who knows how to keep things together, and Saito is always nice to her. So she was hoping Akane could get Saito to like her back. Akane agrees to help her, but she doesn't know how exactly she's supposed to help, so she asks Himari what she wants her to do. Himari says she just wants Akane to give her some information about Saito's interests so she can relate to him more, but come to think of it, Akane doesn't actually know much about Saito. Later that evening, Saito finds Akane standing behind him with a pen and notepad in her hand. He's a little freaked out, so he asks her what she's doing, but Akane just says she's observing him and doesn't explain further. Saito tries to ignore her, but Akane keeps following him around, and even when it's dinner time, she holds her camera up to his face. He asks her if there's a reason she's holding the camera so close to his face, but Akane can't tell him about Himari's crush, so she tells him to just ignore it. Saito decides to just eat his dinner, and while he's eating, Akane asks him if there's a particular type of girl he likes. Saito is surprised by the sudden question, but he tells her he doesn't have a specific type. Next, Akane asks him what his favorite food is, and Saito tells her he likes steak, sushi, and seafood bowls, topped with caviar. That last one is a little too fancy, so Akane asks how he likes his steak done, and Saito tells her he prefers his steak rare. At school the next morning, Akane informs Himari of Saito's favorite food, and Himari is glad to learn a side of him she didn't know about before, and since she's so interested in learning more about what Saito likes to do, Akane tells her that Saito likes playing video games and reading books before bed. Himari thinks that's really interesting, but she wonders how Akane could possibly know what Saito likes to do before bed, so Akane has to make up an excuse and says she overheard him talking about it earlier. That night, Akane is getting ready to make dinner, so Saito asks what's on the menu for the night. Akane tells him she's going to make fish, so Saito is really disappointed. He says he thought she would make steak for him since she was asking him about it yesterday. Akane had never intended to make steak, but since Saito was looking forward to it so much, she agrees to do it, although they're going to need to shop for ingredients. While walking back from the grocery store, Akane tells Saito that she really enjoys doing things like this. It makes her feel kind of nostalgic because she used to go shopping with her mom when she was little, but Saito can't relate to that. When they get home, Akane prepares the steak for Saito just like she promised, and when Saito takes his first bite, he just kinda stares at the plate for a second in shock. Akane thinks Saito must hate the steak she prepared, but he tells her it's actually so good that he wishes he could eat it every day. Akane can't believe Saito is giving her such high praise for her food, but she's happy about it. So she says she'll make as much amazing food as Saito wants. But as she says this, she gets a bit too close to Saito's face, so they both get embarrassed. The next day at school, Himari approaches Saito at his desk and asks him if there's a particular type of girl that he likes. She says she heard that Saito doesn't have a particular type, but she just wants to confirm for herself. First of all, Saito asks her where she got that information, but Himari doesn't want to reveal that she got Akane to ask him, so she pleads the fifth. Anyway, about her question, Saito says he doesn't agree with the whole categorizing people into types thing. He would never know if he wanted to go out with someone unless he got to know them first. It's answers like that that make Himari love Saito so much. A lot of guys often ask her out without knowing anything about her, and when she asks what they like about her, it's almost always about her chest size. Saito admits it must be rough for pretty girls like her to have to deal with that, but Himari can't get over the fact that Saito just called her pretty. Saito doesn't get why she's so happy about being called pretty because it's pretty obvious that she's attractive. Once Himari has calmed down, recounts that Saito said he wouldn't know if he liked someone until he got to know them well enough, and since that's the case, she whispers in his ear and asks if he thinks he could fall for someone like her. Saito is caught off guard by her question and asks if she's being serious, but Himari gets embarrassed, says she was only joking, and runs off. Later that day, while Saito is playing games in the living room, Akane sneaks into his room and starts snooping around for information to give Himari. But just when she finds Saito's diary, Saito comes in and spots her. She immediately becomes defensive and yells that she's not funneling information about him to anyone, but Saito has no idea what she's talking about. And even if she's snooping around in his room, it's not like he has any secrets worth looking at. In that case, Akane asks him if he can recommend one of his favorite books to her, and Saito is more than happy to oblige. So he hands her this thick book about history and the art of war and tells her he enjoys laughing at the stupidity of humans while reading it. Akane doesn't understand the appeal, but she relays the information to Himari anyway. But the next day at school, Himari meets up with Akane and tells her she couldn't understand a single word of it. Akane apologizes because she should have asked Saito to recommend a book that's not so complicated, but Himari actually prefers it this way since she has an excuse to talk to Saito now. Himari then runs over to him and says there's a book she doesn't understand, so she'd like him to help explain it to her. While Himari does this, Akane watches from the door and she's starting to feel a little jealous about how casually Himari can talk to Saito. Saito tells Himari he doesn't mind explaining the book to her, after all, he kinda owes her. Whenever Saito and Akane had fights at school, Himari would always step in to mediate for them, so he's grateful to her for that. Himari says she just doesn't like seeing people fight, but if not for her, Saito genuinely thinks Akane might have killed him months ago. Himari thinks Saito might be exaggerating a little since Akane is actually pretty nice, because back in grade school, Akane helped her out when she was getting bullied. Saito is surprised that a social butterfly like Himari was bullied, but back then, she wasn't good at talking with people, and she looked different, so she was an easy target to make fun of. Her blonde hair may stand out, but Saito thinks it really suits her, so anyone who would make fun of her for it must be really stuck up. Himari thinks it's funny that Saito would say that since Akane said the same thing back in grade school to stick up for her. Thanks to Akane, the bullies finally left Himari alone, and ever since then, Akane has been really important to Himari. Akane hears all this and she is deeply touched by how much her friend cares about her. But just then, Shizi appears and asks her if she's jealous of Himari having a crush on Saito. Akane denies being jealous and says she's just surprised by Himari's feelings, but Shizi tells her Himari's feelings are in no way new. Himari has had a crush on Saito ever since their first year of high school here. Honestly, Shizi is surprised Akane never noticed because Himari gets along really well with Saito. In fact, they look like they'd be the perfect couple if they started going out. Akane starts looking a bit uncomfortable at the thought of Saito and Himari as a couple, so Shizi asks her if she's hoping Saito and Himari don't start going out, but Akane doesn't have an answer to that. After school that day, Himari meets Akane outside to thank her for all her help since she got to spend the day talking with Saito about the book. She is really happy, so she offers to buy Akane a strawberry parfait to show her gratitude. She suggests that the two of them could spend the night at Akane's house and have fun like usual. Akane is really excited to have Himari over since it's been a long time since they've gotten to hang out together, but then she realizes that it'd be really bad for Himari to find out that she lives with Saito. She tries to make an excuse that her house is too messy for her to come over, but Himari remembers hearing Shizi talk about visiting Akane a few days ago, so why would Akane allow Shizi to come over, but not Himari? Himari assumes Akane must just not like hanging out with her anymore, but Akane assures her that's not the case. Akane eventually ended up agreeing to let Himari come over, so she hurries home to warn Saito ahead of time. They can't let Himari find out that both of them live together, so she asks Saito to hide all his stuff in his room until she leaves. Unfortunately, the doorbell rings and they realize that Himari has already arrived, so they don't have any time to spare. Akane tells Saito to start hiding his stuff while she keeps Himari busy. Saito gets to work gathering his stuff, but he doesn't have enough time to hide it in his room, so he ducks behind the counter as Himari and Akane walk back in. Once Himari and Akane sit down to chat, Himari tells her that she plans to ask Saito out on a date tomorrow, so she wants to know if Akane is okay with that. Akane doesn't understand why Himari is asking for permission from her, so Himari explains that Akane has always been fixated on Saito ever since their freshman year, so even if she claims to hate him, Himari knows some part of he must secretly have a thing for Saito, and Himari wouldn't want to get in the way of that. She likes Saito, but she likes Akane even more, so if Akane isn't comfortable with her going out with Saito, she won't ask him out. Again, Akane assures Himari that she doesn't care if she asks Saito out because she hates him more than anyone in the world. Saito heard the entire conversation, and he's starting to feel down because he didn't realize Akane still hated him so much. The next day, Himari gets Saito alone in an empty classroom to ask him out on a date, and while that's happening, Akane and Shizi are standing outside the door. That night, while Saito is having dinner with Akane, he tells her about his date with Himari and asks her how she feels about it since they are technically married. Akane gets up and yells that this marriage is fake, and that she has no feelings for Saito, so whomever he dates is none of her business. Saito accepts her answer and says he just wanted to make sure she was alright with it, but Akane is already regretting what she said. The next morning, Saito gets dressed and is about to head out the door, but Akane is starting to feel really uncomfortable about this date. She asks him if he's really going to go, and Saito plans to, unless of course Akane says she wants him to stay. Akane tells him he can do whatever he wants, so Saito starts walking out the door, but before he leaves, Akane grabs him from behind and says she doesn't want him to go after all. She can't explain why, but the thought of him having fun with another girl makes her really sad, and even if it was a forced marriage, he's still her husband, so she won't let him cheat on her. Saito smiles after hearing this because that's exactly the kind of reaction Saito was hoping to get. He tells Akane he actually turned Himari down when she asked him out, so he's been lying about having a date this entire time, and now he knows for sure that Akane cares about him. Anyway, since he's dressed up already, he invites Akane out to do some shopping with him to make up for the prank he played on her. The following day at school, Himari greets Saito as usual, and he's surprised that she's acting so normal even though he turned her down. But just because she got rejected once doesn't mean Himari is going to give up. She swears that she will keep trying until Saito falls for her someday. But now that Akane has acknowledged her feelings for Saito, she's not going to sit by and let Himari steal him from her. This was the end of episode 5. Subscribe to not miss the next part.